abstract away the chain, abstract away the wallet, and abstract everything else with Abstract SDK. So with one account and easy sign-in, it controls and manages all the other chains and accounts and complexities, leaving the users with an abstracted experience. Today we're going to talk with their founder, Adair, all about it. What is Abstract? Explain Abstract for us.
Yeah, so Abstract is a platform for interchain accounts and applications. We provide infrastructure for any chain in Cosmos that supports CosmWasm to support smart accounts, allowing their users to sign in with email or Web3 or their passkey, and then use those smart accounts to control accounts on any chains. This is similar to interchain accounts within Cosmos, but because every single one of these accounts that's controlled on other chains is also a smart account called an abstract account, you get superpowers, and it enables next generation applications like interchain vault protocols and more, which I'm sure we'll dive into later.
Yeah, so I guess let's start with these, you call them abstract accounts. Is there a main abstract a hub? Is there a chain, a specific place? Where do these abstract accounts live on? Are there multiple?
Yeah, so abstract accounts support any CosmWasm VM. So like there's various different hub chains. Our primary hub chain right now would be Zion, which is a new consumer-focused L1, bringing a lot of users in from Web 2 through brands like North Face and Nike and otherwise. However, like we also support other VMs such as Neutron, Archway, Juno, Terra, Osmosis, any of the CosmWasm VMs. And there is something kind of cool here, is that you can actually use your own personal rollup as an accounts hub. And this would allow for any application to spin up a rollup, have its application focus infrastructure on that rollup, but also be able to self-host all of their users' authentication credentials. And so this brings a more Web 2-like experience where the user authentication is handled by the application itself instead of the underlying platform. If you're building an app chain, you don't want to rely on another app chain's authentication. You would want to actually have that all under your control so that you can give a more fluid, streamlined user experience. So to answer your question, Abstract supports multiple different hubs. Any CosmWasm chain can be a hub, and this hub can also, yes, while it can control other Cosmos chains, it can also control other EVM chains. And this is what Zion is most excited to use abstract accounts for, because it allows their users to use any applications on these EVM chains, even though they're not supported directly by Cosmos.
Mm-hmm. I guess now let's get into the name, like why abstract? What are you guys extracting away? Then go through the user experience and then talk around sort of how it works all in the background and like how developers can use it. So why the name abstract? Go for it.
Okay, so I'll give you two explanations for the name abstract. So one is the super nerdy one, which is the original reason we called it abstract. So we started out with the idea that it was really hard to build apps in Cosmos. Terra was exploding. There were all these new protocols launching left and right, and every single protocol would just redo the same code over and over again. They'd build a new integration for that new DEX. They'd build all their authentication and their checks from scratch every time. This was costing teams a lot of money because audits were flying off the shelves. Auditors were booked always. And so these teams were getting the same code that's already been written in other applications re-audited, which was really inefficient. So we set out to build Abstract, which is an application framework and infrastructure for building applications piece by piece, modularly. So the original thesis for Abstract was to take these different modules and put them together. And this turned Abstract into an app factory. However, the cool thing about Abstract is that an app factory itself is also an app. And so it also could be an app factory. And if you've studied computer science or you've taken any CS courses, CS 101, you'll know that an app factory or a factory is an abstract factory. And so abstract is derived from being an abstract app factory. and that's where the name came from. Yes. The second, less nerdy, less nerdy reason for it being called abstract is because we believe that abstraction is the key to adoption of Web3. We are using a web browser right now. We don't think about like what server we're connecting to, what country that we're using, or any of the infrastructure behind the scenes. We just go into the browser, which offers an abstraction over internet protocol, over HTTP, over like all of these different protocols that power our day-to-day lives on the internet. We need the exact same thing for Web3 to I guess get this technology adopted at all. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that was really good. I also want to get into this is fairly ahead of like the narrative of abstraction. Like this has been when have you guys started? This was before the trend, right?
Yes. So we this was the whole idea for abstract was Robin's idea. My co-founder Robin. So he was working for White Whale in the Terra ecosystem, and he came up with the idea for the framework 3 years ago, like actually before the first Cosmoverse in 2021. Um, when we decided to both quit our jobs and start Abstract as a company, like it was right before the Terra boom. So, or like right before the Terra bust. My bad. Uh, it feels like they were so close to one another, really. Um, but yeah, it was far ahead of its time, and I think that we've been consistently too early. We've built a lot of tech that offers developers really advanced tooling and infrastructure for building like high quality applications, similar to the applications that you can build in Web 2, right? Because Abstract was actually the modular design was modeled after microservices, like microservice based architectures, where every module, every component does one specific thing within the applications. However, the problem with this thesis and the problem with being early is that the applications that people are and were building in DeFi were not advanced enough to merit this kind of infrastructure and this kind of framework. So, um, yeah.
And so I guess now let's get compare the user experience like previously with like Cosmos chains or just in general Web3, just like user experience and then like what Abstract is trying to do. I do remember there is like multiple different versions of like JS. You have like Secret JS, you have Osmo JS, you have I think Terra had a version. So they just like talk about all that.
Yeah. So you're asking about the experience of using abstract or like using Cosmos without abstract and then with abstract.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Sort of the
Okay.
problem you guys are solving.
Yes. Okay. So without abstract, a user has to go on, like to use an application. Let's say this application is on Neutron. The user has to identify what token is on Neutron, how to get that token, and how to get that token, which is generally performing a swap and then bridging that over to the Neutron chain. Osmosis has done incredible job at making this as easy as possible, where users can off-ramp Atom from any other exchange, or they can buy Osmo directly on the Osmosis webpage. Though, like this process is still 4 or 5 steps to get into an application. Even though the bridging may be abstracted away, like Osmosis has made IBC kind of disappear behind the scenes like magic. Um, the user still has to go through this process. And with abstract, our idea was to allow, similar to account abstraction in Ethereum, where you separate the authentication from the execution, and you allow the user to authenticate themselves and then have someone else relay the transaction onto the chain so that the user can have a fully gasless experience and then transact with the applications as they would any other in Web 2. Um, I guess if you think about this a little bit more, the problem with this is that every application that we use nowadays uses tokens. So that's the thing that we solve with interchain abstract accounts. If the user has tokens on any chain, like let's say they have tokens on Ethereum or Arbitrum or just on Solana, and they have these other different wallets, the user is able to connect these wallets and use an application as if those balances were directly on the chain that the application is on. So this means that if a user has on ramped anywhere else in Web3, they're able to take those tokens and their identity with them to a new application, use it immediately. And if they haven't, then yeah, they can on ramp funds directly into that app. And
Mhm.
this solves a lot of the problems with user onboarding in Cosmos and in Web3 in general. And we're hoping that we can bring this technology to make Web2 applications more likely to build on Web3 tech because the experience is going to be more similar to what people are used to.
Mm. And so I guess previously the Cosmos model and like the bad model is like you have to go to the network, deposit your tokens to the network, and then use that application. And so like the user has to be at the destination and they have to like move all of their stuff to that specific chain in order to use the chain. And so is abstract more like all the applications come to you, or are you sort of everywhere at once? Like, how would you describe it? I know there's a difference between account abstraction and like chain abstraction. Could you just explain the mental model of that?
Yes. So for account abstraction, it gives you the ability to separate that authentication from the execution on one chain. This gives you a smart contract wallet that can operate autonomously based on your authentication credentials that someone would pass in. You would create a signature off chain and bring it on chain, and then the account would execute on your behalf. For chain abstraction, it's really the idea of hiding. Well, actually, chain abstraction is really interesting because there's many different definitions here. When we first pitched chain abstraction at Gateway to Cosmos last year, we described it as being able to build applications on any chain and have users be able to interact with these interchain applications as if they had no idea what chain it was on, because the user really shouldn't care. So chain abstraction has two definitions, or maybe even three. One is hiding the complexity of blockchain interactions from the end user. They shouldn't know that they're using a chain. So it's abstracting the chain away, just like account abstraction is abstracting the account away. The second definition is being able to execute transactions on multiple different chains in a process called that's more skews towards orchestration, allowing for one chain or one account to execute transactions anywhere else, giving the user a chain abstracted experience. Because if they're going from Uniswap to an Aave deployment to Jito, they don't have to care which chain these applications are on. Their tokens should just be there. And that is the ideal world that we're building towards, where a user can sign in with an abstract account and all of their tokens are just immediately present within the application, or at least it'll seem that way. And they can interact with it and just use it like you use any other web page. You don't go to a new web page and sign in with Google and then have to create like more account details. It's just you go ahead, you sign in with Google, and you can use it. It's awesome.
Yeah. And so I guess now let's go through the process. So let's say like my like Zoomer little brother who's like 16 years old wants to buy an NFT. Like explain how they would use abstract and go through all of that. Just like the process. Right now, it's like you have to write down these words. Can you just go through all of that, like the whole process?
Cool. All right, process of buying an NFT. So first you have to find the NFT. Generally, you'll find this on an NFT marketplace like OpenSea or maybe even Magic Eden, and you have to identify exactly. Wait, wait. I have to think about this. Give me a second,
Go.
because OpenSea and I'm talking to you. OpenSea and Magic Eden already offer um, like account abstracted solutions like directly on their websites. So where is your brother finding an NFT?
Let's say he just sees a bad kid. Let's just like give that example.
Yeah, this might not be the best example as well because Stargaze also has some
Mhm.
um, they have the ability to on ramp with any funds. So I mean, the answer to your question, if they wanted to buy a bad kid, they go to Stargaze. They'd pick out the bad kid, and they'd be able to just purchase it with on-ramped funds that on-ramp directly. Now, if your brother wanted to take that NFT and sell it on a marketplace like OpenSea, he would have to go through the steps of bridging that NFT to, I suppose, Axelar, and then bridging it to Ethereum. And this is not a simple process because there's no standard way to do so. With Abstract, your brother would be able to take their Abstract account on Stargaze and just tell that account to, hey, I want to sign into OpenSea. The account would recognize that OpenSea is an Ethereum based application. And when he goes to interact with the application, which is selling an NFT, the Abstract account would be able to take that NFT, figure out all of the magic happening in the background to get that NFT from Stargaze to Ethereum. It would do that, and then he would be able to list that NFT on OpenSea. Now, I will give you this explanation with a little bit of maybe a grain of salt because I'm not sure if there is a proper bridging protocol to get NFTs from Cosmos onto Ethereum. And I'm not sure how common it is to list an NFT from one marketplace and sell it on another. So, yeah. At the end of the day, your brother would own the NFT because he has an account on Stargaze. If he bought other NFTs by signing into his Abstract account on OpenSea, then he would also own those NFTs. And with chain abstraction, he should not care that it's on Stargaze or Ethereum. It should just, he
Mm-hmm.
owns them. They're in his wallet. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really good example because although you could have a singular chain or like a singular application with account abstraction where you can like log in with Google, as soon as you want to do cross chain things, it gets super complex. So that's why you need an abstract offers account abstraction on top of chain abstraction. So I think
Yes.
that's like a really good understanding of that. And so you guys have integrations. The main hub is on Xerion, is that correct?
Zion. So
Zion.
Xerion is another wallet.
Okay.
Zion is a chain.
And so this is in Cosmwasm, and then you guys are integrated with, I know, IBC. Can you talk about the EVM integrations as well?
So for EVM interoperability, we actually leverage a chain and a protocol called Union. So Union offers the connection to EVM chains directly through IBC by allowing their chain to be proven very efficiently within 6 seconds per block, and also being able to verify those proofs on the EVM side, bringing a true IBC implementation to EVM. So Union is used as an interoperability hub. Any chain in Cosmos can connect to Union via IBC, and then with abstract accounts, it seems like there's a direct connection between the Cosmos chain and the EVM chain, even though it hops through Union. And this is because of some amazing work that they've done, and we're really excited to be working with the Union team. When IBC Eureka comes out, we will certainly offer this as an alternative path to sending messages over to EVM chains, though we imagine that most users are going to just go by the default route, which is Union, because it offers a more faster execution of those messages across different chains. So this protocol on top of Union we've built is for interchain accounts. It allows for a one-to-one mapping between an account in Cosmos to an account on EVM. And here's the magic, is that those accounts on EVM are also smart contract accounts. So these smart contract accounts, they conform to the 4337 standard as well as the 7579 standard. This means that the users using abstract accounts don't have any lock-in. This means that if they onboard, and it also means that if those users onboard through Polymarket, or if they have a Gnosis Safe, or if they onboard through any of those other account abstraction solutions, they're able to take that smart account and connect it directly to the abstract protocol to allow that smart account to be controlled by any of those accounts in Cosmos chains. There's like quite a bit more infrastructure and magic behind this that I'd love to dive into, and like the vision of why this is important. Though, yeah, if I hope
Uh,
that answers your question.
that
Yeah.
is good. So I understand. Does your Does your abstract account own the account on, let's say, the EVM chain being like base?
Yes.
And
So
do
yeah.
you have to have another? Do you have to have like a base wallet and then connect all your like MetaMask, Kepler, Leap into like one abstract account, and then like it owns all the other ones, or it's just one wallet, multiple accounts? How does that work?
It's one wallet for multiple different accounts, and in an ideal scenario, when some standards gets pushed through on the Ethereum side, namely 7702, and then there's also a new proposal for this Fusion account, you'd be able to take any existing EOA or smart contract account, connect it directly to your smart contract account on the abstract side, and your contract account would be able to act on behalf of your EOA. And this is something that we've had in Cosmos for a very long time. It's a something called authz, because your wallet in Cosmos is able to give permissions and delegate control over the actions that the wallet can take directly to the smart contract account. And actually, this is how some of the abstract applications work, where it proxies transactions through your EOA. And this means that all of your balances would show up in the explorers, all of your transactions would show up, even though the complex transactions are actually performed behind the scenes by the smart contract account.
Mm-hmm. And so another thing is that abstract is not necessarily like a wallet. It's like you can use any wallet, correct? Or
It's like well, I was going to say it's like a meta wallet, though that's the term that Zion uses. So with Abstract, we have this modal and this experience called sign in with Abstract, where you can sign in with any wallet, or you can use your email or perhaps a passkey, and this gives you an Abstract account, and your external wallet is the owner and the authenticator for that Abstract account if you chose to connect to wallet. And the issue with this, and the issue with a lot of these other account abstraction solutions, is that there is an explicit distinction between the two. The smart contract account doesn't have the balances that your EOA has, and the executions actually come from the smart contract account as well. And so this is really confusing for users. Every user is like, okay, so I have my wallet here. Why don't I see my balances in my account? Um, and this is going to get solved. This is solved in the Cosmos ecosystem with authz, and it will be solved in the EVM ecosystem with the introduction of 7702, as well as these Fusion accounts.
yeah, let's talk more about integrations and sort of standardization. So Cosmos has some pretty good standards, like off the interchain accounts, but like Ethereum doesn't. How do you combine the two? Is it just EVM and Cosmos for right now, or sort of how do you think about the like growing world of just so many standards for abstraction?
It's a bit of a mess, I would say, and I think that Ethereum actually does it in a little bit better way than how Cosmos does it, because Cosmos goes out and they're like, "Hey, let's make a standard," and then everyone is like, "Yeah, let's make a standard." They're all looking the other direction. They're like, "We're gonna make our own standard," and we've seen this time and time again. We saw this with Token Factory. We saw this with some of the abstract account implementations. There was a working group for abstract accounts for a while, or smart accounts, and Cosmos has a really hard time coming together and making good standards. However, in the Ethereum ecosystem, as you can see, I think like we're approaching 10,000 on the the improvement proposals. So at what point are there too many standards? And it's a really hard question to answer, because a lot of the Ethereum community does come to a consensus on a proper standard. And we've seen this with 4337. We're starting to see this with 7579, which is a modular smart contract account. I didn't explain that before, though. I really like how the Ethereum ecosystem and all the EVM chains work together to make sure that they're not like fragmenting themselves. Yes, there are fragmented implementations, especially as new versions get pushed and pushed and pushed. However, it's a lot easier to work with than in Cosmos. The way that we put this together is that the protocol takes a little bit of an opinionated approach, where it we choose the most generic standard that works for the most applications where it will be most widely accepted, and we give those kind of accounts to the end user while still allowing for the extensibility of, well, still allowing it to be extended with additional functionality in the future. Yeah.
Mhm. Let's talk more about Zion. So, I guess you guys are the like, I want to say dashboard, sort of the main account abstraction. Sort of explain that relationship and sort of the benchmarks that you guys have been doing, or the accomplishments, all that stuff.
Yeah. So on Zion, we act as the interoperability and the interchain account infrastructure for every account on their chain. The core accounts are smart contract accounts, they're abstract accounts, and they can communicate with our interchain accounts protocol that we've developed directly on their chain. So that means that any user performing an interchain transaction is actually doing so through abstract infrastructure. And to the end user, they are not seeing any of this complexity behind the scenes because we're ensuring that transactions that are initiated from Zion in the SDKs, they just look like they're transactions being executed asynchronously. This means that when the developer is building an application or something that interacts with these EVM chains, they just know that they're interacting with smart contracts that exist somewhere, and they're going to get a response from execution or the delivery of the messages to that contract. We're really excited to be working with Zion, and we've run one campaign with them thus far, where you can mint an NFT from Zion to Neutron. You know, it's not all that crazy. However, like as an end user, you actually sign in and you get a session key. This session key means that it has scoped permissions for that application, meaning that it can only perform a few actions, in this case, minting that NFT. But because it has scope permissions, you don't have to sign those transactions. You've already signed a transaction by giving it permissions in the first place. You've given it that authorization. And it's the same thing with the EVM chains. What we're really excited for with this new experience we're delivering with Berachain in the next few weeks is that users are going to be able to, perform a swap. Not all that crazy on Berachain. However, they're going to be able to do it in two ways. One is they sign up with their Zion account. They can perform that transaction. It goes from Zion, sends it over IBC, and executes it on Berachain. The second way is that the user can sign into the application and say, hey, I want to sign into this Berachain application. And Berachain Smart Account is going to say, okay, I'm going to sign in this user. I'm going to give them a session key for executing on Berachain. And then the user can perform transactions at the speed that Berachain goes without having to wait for the latency that IBC adds in the middle. And the user has like a fully chain abstracted experience with almost instant execution. It's just like magic. And I'm really excited to, I guess, make this public and share it with the world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is cool. I think like one of the important things about abstraction is that like it doesn't have to be cool. Like it has to work, and it kind of feels like we're jumping through all these hoops, and then whenever you finally try like something that's like really seamless, you're like, oh, like that's it. It's like
it's not exciting.
It's not exciting. That's
the big problem with the campaign that we're doing is like I'm like, it looks like you're just performing a swap. It's like not all that crazy. So we need to add like some additional things where you're performing transactions across 3 or 4 different chains, and the user just has to come back and check on it every now and then, just to make it more engaging, because swaps are so last year. They're so 2020.
Mm-hmm. Well, I just think like it's not supposed to be. You're not like, oh my god, like Google authentication works this day. You're not like excited.
Yeah.
I just think like it's just supposed to work.
Yes.
I guess now let's get into the authentication side of things, or sort of the I guess you already touched on it, but so for signing in initially, I know some wallets it's like you create the seed phrase, and then if you want to like move your money from like Cosmos to Ethereum, you have to like sign 3 different times. Like it'll have you sign the Cosmos transaction. It'll
Mm.
go through all of Cosmos, and then it'll be like do the Ethereum one, and you have to sign that. Is that the case with Abstract? Is that something you can't get over, or just explain?
No, actually. So with Abstract, the account itself, the smart contract wallet, the Abstract account is the owner and the signer of like technically like the signer of the transactions on the remote chains. And so when a user performs a multi-hop transaction, the account is the one that's signing for all of those different hops. And there are a few oddities here on chains such as Noble, where the account itself doesn't have a smart contract some smart contract paired because Noble doesn't support the Cosmos VM. And so in these cases, the user we generate them a recovery address, like a recovery seed phrase that's just automatically ingrained into their account. And that also means that they can export their account at any time. And this is something just happening behind the scenes, but the user doesn't have to sign all of these interchain transactions. It's only in a very bad worst case scenario when like they might have to recover their account to get some assets that may have been stuck somewhere. Though, yeah, as I mentioned, like in it's not supposed to happen.
Okay. Because I think that's very important. Sometimes I sign a transaction and then I have to wait like a couple of minutes to sign the other one, and I'm just like,
Yeah.
it's just not a good experience.
Yes. And on those
Revising.
experiences, like really the app should be able to pre-calculate what the transaction is that you can sign so that you can sign all three of them up front. Um, though I think it probably isn't due to nonce issues, maybe. Yeah. I'm not sure what the core issue there is.
And so now let's get into seed phrases. They're typically really hard to like just keep, especially for normal people. Just the amount of friction. I won't use other ecosystems if it's not like compatible with my wallet, because I'm not about to like, if I lose these 12 words, like I'm like, screwed forever. Can you talk about sort of the friction of seed phrases, sort of the sign in with Google, the recovery, social recovery, like just all those sort of signing and security key management, I guess.
Yes. So when a user uses a Web2 method like sign in with Google, there is some MPC happening behind the scenes. We support a few providers here. One of those providers is Zion, like as a chain. They provide some JWT, which is JSON Web Token authentication, provided by Google as an OAuth provider. We also support means such as Capsule, which gives you an MPC wallet that supports those social sign-ins. And these logins, like these authenticators, generally, when you have an abstract account, you don't want just one authenticator. You definitely want recovery authenticators because users reset their passwords at least like 2 to 3 times a year on average. And it's because like we're all human, and a user shouldn't be entrusted with all of these funds held within an account, just governed by one authenticator, because it's more than likely that they're going to lose it and they're going to be very upset at the platform. So as I mentioned before, users have a recovery seed phrase that's automatically generated and stored in a vault. I believe this just happens in the background. And this is something that can be always used as a signer in worst case scenarios. Um, of course, like there are a lot of efforts that teams should be putting into the front end, where if a user has like $100 in their account, one authenticator, one signer is totally fine because you're not putting the user out on the line for thousands of dollars. But once you get up there, once the amount of capital that's in the account increases, you should definitely be pushing the user, saying like, "Hey, please do not transact on this account without adding an additional authenticator." And it should be put at the UI level, and have them sign something explicitly saying, "I am making a bad decision by not adding a second authenticator, and I promise that I'm not going to sue like X, Y, and Z MPC provider if I lose my keys." There's still that issue, but we have that issue in Web 2 as well. something I'm really excited for is the ability to use one-time passwords with wallets, because like almost every single website nowadays supports two-factor authentication, where you go to your authenticator and like you copy the numbers and slap them into the I guess the box, um, and it verifies that one-time passcode. The problem is that doing this in the smart contracts is relatively difficult, because I believe that you have to pre-generate all of the one-time passwords, and you can't store some of the private credentials associated with that OTP completely on chain. So there's a lot of work to be done there, though that's the next step in making this experience for end users far more secure, and far more akin to Web 2.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the biggest barrier to entry has always been like the wallets. And it's like, if you lose these words, your money's gone forever. And for a lot of people, they've lost all their Bitcoin or like Dogecoin self custody. Like not like on like a centralized exchange, just like they threw out their laptop and like never recovered it. And all their Bitcoin on like an exchange is still there, which is kind of like contrary to like the not your keys, not your coins advice. But
Yeah.
there's always been a barrier for like those words. And it's like there's this like problem of sovereignty, which is like you want to own your own money, but also you own all your money. Like you don't have thousands of dollars under your mattress. And so like now you have this responsibility of keeping all this money, the security. I
Yeah.
think that's always been the problem. And like these less extreme, more I guess diversified solutions where you get multiple paths of recovery is like the big hurdle that solves the sovereignty aspect, but also like diversity recovery aspect. Uh, is there anything else you wanted to talk about? Is there anything I
I
missed?
think like what the maybe the end goal of like having all of these hubs and having apps being able to self-host their authentication is like relatively not talked about in Web3. Like it's only talked about maybe a little bit in the Cosmos ecosystem, maybe a little bit with Celestia, like pushing like modular DA. Like every app should have its own chain. Though I truly believe that every single user and like every single application will have its own chain, and this makes for an incredibly self-sovereign and also seamless experience anywhere. Because when you make I guess transactions, but they're not transactions. When you make requests from your browser to all of these other servers, you're doing it from your own browser. You're doing it and you're storing some data for those sessions, and then your computer is just hiding away the complexity of all of these transactions or requests that you're making and the responses. And this also gives you a lot of sovereignty, because you can store some authentication credentials or anything related to those transactions directly on your PC. And your PC is something that you can consider private. It's protected by password. So if we think about this a little bit further, like let's take what we have right now with hub and spoke model, right? You sign into Zion and you have this hub, and then you have all of these interchain accounts that you can execute transactions on. Zion acts as your key store. They hold those authentication credentials on your behalf, and it's assumed that they have enough economic security to protect those authentication credentials. It's the same thing that can be said for any other hub chain. Like when a user signs into Abstract, and if they had the choice to choose a hub chain, they should choose one with very high economic security, because they're the one that chain is acting as like a signer on their behalf, like with their credentials. So, okay, this is great. And it's great because we can all interact with these hub chains. We can transact on all of these remote chains. However, there's a limitation. Like these hub chains are not going to be able to support hundreds of thousands and millions of users all performing transactions at once. And when the user signs into various services, like let's say they were signing into an e-commerce marketplace, there's still that latency of getting the transaction signed by the hub chain and then executing it um, on the website. It's kind of similar to the hub chain acting as an OAuth provider for that website, and like you allow, it's like when you're hub chain is Zion, it's sign in with Zion. It's like sign in with Abstract, but it's really sign in with Zion. Um, or if the hub chain is Neutron, it's sign in with Neutron because Neutron is acting as that authentication provider. However, we're seeing like a big shift of websites like looking to kind of like early Web 2, where every single website had its own authentication. Every website had its own email and password. That's going to be something that they demand because they don't want that latency of having to verify the consensus of all of these different chains and like all of these intermediaries just to get their users in their application. So the application can host its own, authentication. It can maybe even link up to the Zion authentication or to any of these other hub chains. Um, this is cool and all, but again, you run into issues where the application's key store is only as secure as the economic security of the application itself. Okay, so what about like the end user? What is their experience in interacting and doing and performing these interactions? The user has like let's say we're coming around to tax season, or like next year we'll be coming around to tax season again. So the user has to take their account and they have to think about, okay, what are all of these like crazy cross-chain transactions that I have now performed from my account? You can abstract away the components that interact with the protocol itself, but at the end of the day, the user has to compile all of these transactions, and that might be easily done by a centralized service connecting to all of these chains, getting the transactions from their smart accounts, and so on and so forth. But it's really like the hub chain has all of those transactions that the user has performed because it is always the initiator of those transactions. So push this a little bit further, and it's like we could enter a world where every single user has their own chain, where they are the ones that hold their own key store credentials. Just like on your laptop, you have a key store, and it's trusted by like some of the chips that are on your computer. I think it's like the TPM, Trusted Platform Module, or something. And this key store is used to store SSL certificates and like like things that help you navigate Web 2 completely securely. And yes, you're getting these from centralized places, but you're basically using that to verify the connections that you're making. And you do this in a fully sovereign way. Anyone can use the internet. Anyone can use these encryption protocols. And I believe that anyone should be able to use Web3 regardless of where those transactions are coming from. And so you can have your own personal chain. And this personal chain would be it would act as the signer, allowing you to have smart accounts, allowing you to perform automations, and it would be connected to all of these remote chains. And like because it's only like a single signer, like verifying consensus, like if you used IBC, is very simple. It's just like, yes, you say, you check the box, you're like, yes, we came to consensus because it's only me. But if you added like, you can make that consensus just consensus of signatures, right? Because like you can say, I'm connecting to my personal chain with my wallet, but I also want my sister to connect to my personal chain and sign a transaction with her wallet. You put those signatures together, and that is the consensus. Because making a cross-chain transaction, like it only matters like whether the account that's making the transaction like actually initiated that transaction and verified by the protocol itself. So at the end of the day, you can have users performing transactions on any of these chains, anywhere in Web3, all connected to their personal chain, or like that personal chain connected to a hub, and relaying the transactions on their behalf because the user doesn't want to have all those gas tokens or otherwise. But the user has a record of every single one of those transactions that they ever did. And they have the ability to like take that data of all of those transactions that they did and compile it and like iterate or like add additional software that might be able to analyze it better and better and better each year. But this data can be fully sovereign to the end user. Okay, so that was a long rant to get to users should have personal chains. This gives them ultimate sovereignty over their data, their signing credentials, their transactions, making it easier for them to figure out what interactions they've had in Web3, and also giving them the ability to add multi-signature authentication, also automations, and like maybe even run their own agents that may be performing actions on their personal chain. Okay, This is great, but what's the point? Going forward, the internet is going to become an absolute cesspool of garbage. Like all of these AIs that we have pumping out content day and day and day, or day and night, are going to absolutely destroy the quality of the content that we see on the internet, because new AIs, or like new models as they come out, are going to be trained on this AI gibberish, this garbage. And the most valuable data that we are going to have as humans is the data that we produce as humans, the human created data, because that's actually coming from real people. It's not coming from the machines. And there's like these companies that are trying to what is it called? Watermark the AI generated content. Like somehow in the output, they watermark it and they say, hey, this content came from GPT, or this content came from Llama. Though that's not going to be enough. We need users to be able to sign on behalf of their own content that they generated and placed on the internet, and those users are going to be doing this for every single interaction that they have with the web. And if the user like signs off on some content that their AI produced, that's totally fine. They're just responsible for that content being there on the internet. So this makes it so that everything on the internet that we see going forward should be labeled as insecure, unverified, until we have users adding signatures to all of those posts that they create on Twitter, all of those posts that they put on Instagram, all of those posts that they put on LinkedIn. Any user generated content should be signed by the end user and attributable to them. Because every transaction that we make on these services, such as Twitter, will be essentially a cross chain transaction. If you think about it, when you interact with Twitter today, you're making a cross computer, a cross server transaction. And like the server is performing the authentication on your behalf. But right now, there's no client side signing. And so, well, there kind of is, which HTTPS, but there's there's not really a way for you to sign your content and prove that that content is yours. And that is going to be one of the most important things that we have to protect the integrity of human generated content on the internet going forward. And that's why I believe that personal chains and like everything that we're building in this space is so vital to just humankind. And that's why I'm in Web3. It's kind of like went on a tangent there, but yeah, it's abstract accounts are a step.
That's
And
good. I think like abstract accounts are to verify on-chain transactions, but then you have like sign in with like a chain, but it's like now it's like sign in with Diego chain, and like
yes,
then it's like you own all the infrastructure, you can see all your own signatures, you are your own bank because you're signing all the transactions yourself, you're running all that yourself.
yep,
The like instead of having like, I hate the idea of a ledger. I like the idea of like Apple spent all this time on their own cryptography so you could like have your credit card on your phone. It's
yep,
like, why don't you just like use that? Why don't you have your laptop be the like ledger just like built in? And so like I think I think like abstracting and just like verifying and owning all of that, especially when there's like more noise out there. I think like it's like an ultimate verification account, like for everything, content, finance,
yes.
social media, all that. That was good. I like that.
Yeah,
That's a very
and like the thing is like you can take you because you own all of that data, and because you know like you've generated the signatures from that data. No one can really take that away from you. All of that content still exists on your machine, and like maybe it's a local machine, maybe it's a cloud machine. Um, However, like you can take that and you can take that proof of generation or proof of ownership, whatever it is. And if there's a data broker, like they're looking to buy some data, they can go to you. Excuse me. They can come to you and purchase that data or purchase the access rights to that data and have that purchase be fully recorded on chain. Like these personal chains, they're not going to be public blockchains. They're just like they're private data stores that have signatures that are all chained to one another so that you can't fake those like different signatures. Like you'd have to reorg and it would become increasingly more expensive like the more data that you put on this chain. And it's also really cool because it leads directly into like personal AI, and there's a whole tangent there. But yeah, yeah, it's all coming together. Everything's gonna merge.
Mm-hmm. I love that, the abstracted feature. I guess this is where we wrap it up. Call to action.
If your apps need traction, think abstraction.
Love it. Anyways, thank you for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me on and asking like these delightful questions. It's really fun to chat with someone like so deep in the cosmos and well connected with the technology and these experiences that we've been dealing with as an ecosystem for years. And yeah, it's been really fun.
Mhm. Thank you.